I am going to share a little bit tonight about our new degree programs at Gordon-Conwell. We've had a lot of changes happen in the last year, pretty exciting stuff, lots of work, of course. But some of this is good news for students who have started degree programs at Gordon-Conwell and for various reasons haven't finished. There's a lot of reasons why students start theological studies and then have to take a pause. That's okay. It's a very common experience, but we want to give you guys some hope and some information on some ways that you could continue with us. So first of all, actually, make sure I've got that going. There we go. So the first question we have heard from some folks is why is Gordon-Conwell even making a change, and how big is this change? If you've been around Gordon-Conwell for a while, you know that we have had a lot of degree programs. And if you've ever compared Gordon-Conwell to other schools, you'd see that we have often more than twice as many degree programs as other schools. So we had over 20 unique degree programs as of this past year, and that's very unusual. And every single degree program requires a lot of work. Anytime you make a small change or a big change, you've got folks that are regulating you. Specifically, we've got accreditation bodies, ATS, NECI, and now our counseling accreditation, which is KCREP. We've got federal student loans that we are accountable to. We've got veterans benefits we're accountable to, and they have to know a lot of information about us. So every time we make a change, we're having to submit information on all of those changes to these programs. And so the workload that's required to maintain 20+ programs is pretty significant. And so one of the things that we hope by basically narrowing down our offerings is hopefully going to help us be better stewards of the resources that God has given us. And that should be a good thing for the whole Gordon-Conwell community, students, faculty, and staff. Another reason we are reducing our number of individual programs is so that we can just do a better job of actually fulfilling our mission statement, which is to serve Christ in the church. We want to equip men and women to serve Christ in the church. And the church and culture have shifted pretty significantly since Gordon-Conwell was first founded. Historically, you needed a Master of Divinity to be ordained, depending on your denomination. Some denominations, that's not the case. That's never been the case. Other denominations, it's still the case. But over the years, we've recognized that Gordon-Conwell can serve the church by equipping men and women with theological education to be serving a variety of roles. And so we just think this is a better way to steward our resources, to serve students, to provide greater clarity and more ability to innovate down the road. And I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that when I get to some of the specifics on our degree programs. So by reducing our number of programs, we are streamlining and making things just a little bit more efficient, if you will. So I'm going to start by talking about Masters of Arts degrees, because those are the degree programs that most students would be interested in. Usually if someone is really gung-ho about the Master of Divinity, they know that that's what they want and they stick with it. But more often than not, we have students who start in the Master of Divinity and decide, you know, that's not really the program for me. I wish there were something else that I could do that was ministry related. Or maybe they've started in an academic MA and it was going well and they need a time off. So going forward, we are going to be offering two types of Masters of Arts degrees. We have professional MA programs and an academic MA program. Within our professional MA program, we are offering the Masters of Arts in Global Leadership, and this is a 36 credit hour program, so that's 12 courses. And we're offering a Masters of Arts in Christian Ministries. The MA in Christian Ministries is 48 credits, which is 16 courses. So those are two new degrees that we're excited to offer, particularly because we find that they're very hands-on, so that's particularly helpful. They're still going to have a lot of theological core. They're going to have hands-on practical ministry type classes. And then being shorter, you save money. So we think that's a great situation. We also like these degrees because they really do serve students, again, who do not need an MDiv and maybe don't want to do an MDiv, but would still like to do a mix of theology and ministry courses with us, and who could use that within an existing ministry context. So we see this as really good for folks who are already in a ministry context, whether that's in an overseas missions agency or in a current local church ministry, on staff, paid, unpaid. We think these can be really helpful. And then we will be offering one academic MA program, which is the Master's of Arts in Theological Studies. Now, again, if you've been around Gordon-Conwell, we have historically had a number of academic MAs, and you could do an MA in biblical languages, an MA in church history, an MA in spiritual formation. And so we've had a lot of different MA programs. They were all 60 credits. And essentially what we're doing is we're not just cutting all of these academic MAs, but we are streamlining them all under the MA in Theological Studies. So the MATS is our new academic MA program. Within that program, students are going to complete their specific concentration, and we'll get to those in just a moment. So again, the professional MA focus on ministry skills, the academic MA really related more to teaching, to further study. Most of them are going to have a language requirement and an academic discipline. Now, all of our MA programs, whether it's the MA in Global Leadership, the MA in Christian Ministries, the MA in Theological Studies, are going to have pretty much the same common theological core. This is not significantly different from our old MA programs at Gordon-Conwell. Our old programs, every Gordon-Conwell degree, you have to do Old and New Testament, right? We want you to know the Bible. And if you don't get through those, that's not going to work too well. So you've got to have that for all of the degree programs at Gordon-Conwell. Historically, our MA programs also required students to do an additional class in Old Testament and New Testament. That has been removed going forward, and students will be taking a very specific class called Interpreting the Bible. This is a interpretation class, hermeneutics class that we think is going to serve students well. Now, if we've had students who've already gone through, been enrolled at Gordon-Conwell, maybe they've taken one of the older New Testament requirements, we would certainly be happy to help. And I'll just mention this right at the outset. If you've already taken classes with us and you want to come into one of these degree programs, we definitely want to help fit the things that you've taken into the new program. So if you see something that you're like, well, I kind of did that, but not exactly, we're very happy to work with you. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So interpreting the Bible is a new course requirement. And then for some of the students in the MATS, they will have to take interpreting the New Testament or interpreting the Old Testament, which require Greek or Hebrew. Survey of church history, all of our programs are going to take church history. Now, the exception to that is the MA in Global Leadership, because that program is only 36 credits. It doesn't have that particular requirement. But our other programs are going to have church history. An ethics course, every degree at Gordon-Conwell, you're going to take an ethics course. Theology Survey 1 and 2. So historically at Gordon-Conwell, we offered Systematic Theology 1, 2, and 3. The topics in Systematic Theology 1, 2, and 3 are the same topics that are covered in Theology Survey 1 and 2. So students who've done those can substitute those systematic classes for Theology Survey 1 and 2. There's a new class that we are requiring called Understanding Culture. Understanding Culture is a class that the faculty feel really strongly about for any Gordon-Conwell student to take. Basically, how do we understand the culture around us, and then how do we speak into that? If we can't understand what's happening and know how to contextualize things, we're going to run into some issues. So Understanding Culture is a new class. It's being offered, it actually is offered this summer for the first time by Dr. Una Cho. She's one of our newest faculty members. So we're excited to have her teaching that. And then lastly, every student will do a spiritual formation class, and that's spiritual formation for ministry or dynamics of spiritual life. So that's the common theological core. Nothing wildly different from what you would have seen on old MA programs. Within the MAs, you then have concentration courses. So for an MA in Christian Ministries, a student would take 6 classes from the Division of Practical Theology. And the Division of Practical Theology is simply our ministry division. So that would be courses in Christian leadership, in counseling, and educational ministries, and evangelism, pastoral counseling, preaching, youth ministry. So you can mix and match classes from any of those teaching areas to make up your concentration. We think this is a really good situation for students to do a 48 credit hour MA where you can tailor your concentration around the classes that make sense for your ministry context. So you can mix and match as you want. We do have some students who are not excited to mix and match, and they want to concentrate in a really specific area. Maybe that's important to them vocationally. Maybe they just really want someone to give them a shot at, showing them what a good way to move forward. So we do have some concentrations that the faculty have created, and they've already prescribed what the requirements are for those concentrations. So for the Christian Ministries concentrations, students could do Christian leadership, they can do communication skills, spiritual formation, or urban ministry. And of course, urban ministry is going to be run out of our Boston campus in Roxbury. And we'll look at all of these specific degree requirements in a moment. For the MA in Theological Studies, again, students are going to take classes within their specific concentration. You can have an open concentration in the MA in Theological Studies, and you can mix and match 6 classes from biblical studies or Christian thought, or even some practical theology. The generic MA in Theological Studies is most similar to the old MA in religion. So for students who were in the MAR program, which was our most flexible degree prior to now, the MA in Theological Studies, just the standard track, is very similar to that MAR. But we've got lots of students who want to do concentrations, and so the faculty have created some specific concentrations in the areas of biblical languages, Old Testament, New Testament, church history, theology, intercultural studies, which is world missions, and so if someone's interested in a specific track, we've got it all laid out in terms of what a student needs to do. So when do these programs go into effect? Well, we are already in the process of switching over to these programs, but all of our new incoming students in fall of 2021 will be in one of these new programs. So we've got some current students who've asked to switch over, and we've allowed them to go ahead and do that. I think I have a pending final ATS approval note there, but I think we're actually all set on that. For someone who's a current student, if you have been an active student within the last 2 years, but you just haven't taken anything maybe in the last year and a half, you are not required to change into a new degree program. You can continue with the program you're in. There's no reason for you to switch over to something else. But if you've become inactive, which means you haven't enrolled since summer of 2019, which doesn't seem that long ago. But if you haven't enrolled since then and you want to return to Gordon-Conwell, you would actually then need to apply through the admissions office, and you would be having to apply to one of the new degree programs. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Yep, you'll have to submit an application to a new degree program if you've been gone for more than 2 years. Again, if you haven't been gone for more than 2 years, you can work with the registration office, and we have a streamlined process for students to switch over from one comparable degree to another. I'm going to skip the note on being a dual degree student, but in essence, most of our dual degree students were students doing like Old Testament and biblical languages. They can still do that. They can be a dual concentration student rather than actually a dual degree student. But on occasion, we'll have some students who might do both an MDiv and maybe an MA in global leadership or something, and that's fine. Is every degree available at every campus? Pretty much, but the urban ministry concentration is being run out of Boston, so that is one thing to keep in mind. But we are trying again to streamline this to make this available to students across Gordon-Conwell. This is not just the Hamilton campus situation. And so we are very mindful that as we move forward, these courses are available in a variety of formats. So they're available in person. They're available what we call digital live, which is where you've got a faculty member in a classroom with students, but then you also have students who are connected to that class through Zoom. So they do have to show up at a specific day and time, just maybe not physically. So we give students that choice. And then of course we have online, fully online classes as we've always had. So we are expanding our digital options for folks because we know lots of people have moved around and they can't just drive down to campus as they used to. So that's another thing to keep in mind. We have lots of options for studying from wherever you are. So I'm going to go through, I know this is for some people probably really exciting to see all the specific requirements, for others it's not. So I'm not going to take loads of time, but I do just want to show what the requirements are for each degree program. Because if you have studied at Gordon-Conwell and taken classes, you have some familiarity and might have some interest in how to move forward. So the Masters of Arts in Global Leadership, again, it's 36 credits, that's 12 classes. There are 6 concentration courses. That new class, Understanding Culture, or Cultural Exegesis for Preaching, a Biblical Theology of Leadership, a class on Global Leadership, a new course that's still in process, which is called Christian Ethics and Global Perspective, and then a couple of leadership electives of the student's choice. And then under the core requirements, very simple, Old and New Testament, interpreting the Bible, 2 theology classes, and spiritual formation. So that's our Masters of Arts in Global Leadership. Now, one thing to keep in mind, we see this particular degree as potentially very useful for missions organizations. One, because the name is Global Leadership. It doesn't have like Christian in the title or missions in the title. So we do want this to be a program that's really helpful for missions agencies. So one of the things to keep in mind is that over the next year, some of the concentration courses in this program are probably going to shift. Not necessarily that they would eliminate what's here, but they would open up options for students to be taking world missions classes. Certainly ethics and leadership can be very important in a cross-cultural context, but we may have groups of people working overseas who would like to do a class on the history of Christian-Muslim relations, introduction to Islam, things like that. So more than likely, we're going to see a little bit of shift with the MAGL requirements, where they open up to become more broad and to incorporate world missions courses. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The Masters of Arts in Christian Ministry. So this is one of the programs we're most excited about because, again, it's a 48 credit hour program, so it saves some time and money, and it has a lot of flexibility in it. The general core requirements, again, these are just the same as the others. Your Old, your New Testament, you're interpreting the Bible, your church history, your ethics, your theology, your spiritual formation, and then this new course, understanding culture. Or faculty are okay if students want to take cultural exegesis for preaching. They see those as somewhat equivalent. So you could do either of those. So that's the general core. And then you can do a concentration that's 6 classes, again, of whatever you choose. You can mix and match from, leadership, evangelism, preaching, pastoral counseling. You can really do quite a bit. And then you have 1 open elective as well to do whatever you want. So 9 concentration or 9 core, 6 concentration, and then 1 open elective. So that's the standard track. If you're going to do one of our specialized tracks and do a concentration, like Christian leadership, these would be the classes you would do in the concentration. You would have to do Foundations for Leadership, the person of the Christian leader, leading change in church and organizations. This is a new class. We're going to start rolling it out, I think not this coming year, but the next, because we don't have any students yet who would be lined up to take this class, because you have to take it a little bit later in the program. You would do 2 elective classes of your choice in Christian leadership, and then you would do a ministry project course in Christian leadership. So that would be the leadership concentration. Sorry, I've got 2 concentrations on this slide, so they're a little bit smaller. We have a communication skills concentration. So in this concentration, the faculty want students to take communication for ministry and career. They want you to take a class on conflict management. So you can choose either managing conflict or conflict management in life in the church. They want you to do a communications class, and they've specified here the Christian leader or preaching as leadership. They want you to do educational ministry of the church. They definitely want you to do cultural exegesis for preaching. And then they want you to do any counseling course, because they think counseling is going to be helpful for those who are preaching or communicating to know like a particular audience that you're working with and how to relate to that audience. We then have the spiritual formation concentration, which includes also 18 credits. So in addition to the standard spiritual formation class, students would take dynamics of spiritual life. They would take a church history-based spiritual formation course. They would take a counseling-based spiritual formation course. And then they would have 3 electives in spiritual formation. I think it's actually 2 electives in spiritual formation and a general elective. And then lastly is the urban ministry concentration, which again is being offered through our Boston campus. And you can see their specific requirements that are listed here. One of the nice things to know about our Boston campus is that they're going to start offering a lot of their classes through Digital Live as well. So if you've ever wanted to take a class in Boston but didn't want to drive into the city, on a weeknight, you can actually Zoom in and join class that way. So even if you don't want to do a whole concentration in urban ministry, you can still have access to some of these classes. So we're really excited about that rolling out this fall. The Masters of Arts in Theological Studies. We're getting close. So this is our standard now 60 credit academic MA program. Again, those general core requirements, they're looking really familiar. The only differences are if you're going to do church history or theology concentration, they want you to do the longer church history sequence. So instead of doing the survey class, you would do 2 church history courses that go more in depth, which makes sense because if you've studied theology, then understanding church history is quite helpful to that. So those things go hand in hand. With the MATS, we do see the addition of a world missions or evangelism course. So this now becomes a requirement within the general core. And then we see the addition of languages. So you have to do 2 semesters of a language. That's usually Greek or Hebrew, but we do sometimes have students who are able to take something else. And then you have a couple of electives. So if you follow the MATS standard track, you get 6 concentration courses of your choice to mix and match. The one thing to keep in mind with this track is that no more than 2 of your 6 concentration classes can be 500 level. So in other words, when you're doing an academic MA, these classes do need to be a higher level. So you can't just do all 500 level courses within your concentration. That's not usually a problem, but just want to put that out there. Now, if you're going to do one of our concentrations that's already been predetermined, we'll go through those slides, but just keep in mind that this can sometimes shift a little bit of the core, because again, if you're doing church history, then they want you to not do survey of church history, but the full church history sequence. Or if you're doing biblical languages, you're going to have to take both NT 502 and OT 511. But I'll just walk through some of these concentrations so you can get a feel for what those look like. So here's our biblical languages concentration. If you ever looked at the old biblical languages concentration, there's no difference. This is exactly, or almost exactly, the old program required you to take Aramaic. This gives you the option. You've got to do an advanced language course, but it doesn't prescribe Aramaic. So you can make some changes there. The Old Testament concentration course is also very similar. The difference here is that they want students to take their electives within biblical studies. So you don't get just open general electives if you're doing biblical studies within the MATS. So they are requiring you to do electives within pretty much whatever the opposite of your concentration is. So if you're doing Old Testament, they want you to do an elective in New Testament and do some other courses in Greek or New Testament as well. But otherwise, it's very similar to the old program. And I think I have a typo on here because I think this actually is supposed to have intermediate Hebrew, which I don't see. I believe intermediate Hebrew is a new requirement, so I might need to double check that. New Testament, you can see here again, very similar. And again, if you're doing a lot of New Testament classes, they want you to take some electives in Old Testament to balance that out. With church history, very similar to our old MA in church history program. You're going to do the 2 church history classes, historiography, and then loads of church history electives. Your final course would be a research class where you would be researching and writing. However, you could also do a thesis if you want to. If you do a thesis, it can be a 1-part thesis, that's just 1 class, or a 2-part thesis that would take the place of 2 courses. The theology concentration is, again, extremely similar to the old MA in theology, so not a lot of changes there, very open. And then lastly, next to last, spiritual formation concentration is pretty similar. There are some classes that have been switched around. It's a little bit more open, a little bit more flexible than our old spiritual formation program. So we're happy about that. There's still no language requirements for spiritual formation, so someone can do this program in the MATS without doing languages. And the last MATS concentration is Intercultural Studies. So this would be similar to our old MA in World Missions and Evangelism. It has some classes that are similar, but it's also opened things up to give you more elective options. The old program did not have many electives. So that brings us to the MA programs. I'm going to very, very, very quickly walk you through the other degree programs, just in case there's interest in those, but we wouldn't necessarily expect a student who has stopped out to come back into one of these. But I do want to give you a heads up about our Master of Theology. This is the Th.M program. So historically, the Th.M required students to finish a Master of Divinity first before they could do a Master of Theology. The MDiv is still a stepping stone to the Master of Theology, but the faculty are actually evaluating students who've done an academic MA, and they're allowing students who've done an academic MA into the Th.M, assuming that their academic MA prepared them for their area of study in the Th.M. So if you did an MA focusing in Old Testament and you want to do a Th.M in Old Testament, you're a good candidate for that. And the faculty are open. So that's a new thing. We're excited about that. So our Th.M is still 24 credit hours. That's 8 courses. And most of the tracks are the same. We have added ancient languages and cultures. So that's looking at biblical languages and a lot of historical background courses. We still have Old Testament, New Testament, church history, theology, missiology. Bible exposition and preaching is new. This is sort of a joint Th.M between biblical studies and preaching. So they're trying to help folks not just focus on exegesis and not just focus on preaching, but how to bridge that gap and how to make sure that you're using your exegesis in preaching. So that's sort of an academic / practical degree. So we're excited about that. We have a pastoral theology track, which is designed in a lot of ways for folks who are already in the pastorate and who want to do some advanced classes. The pastoral theology track is going to have a mix of courses, again, from the ministry side of things. You can, some things are prescribed, other things are pretty open, but the Division of Practical Theology, the faculty are pretty excited about this, and they've been working on developing a couple new classes for the pastoral theology track. And again, these classes, they are also very intent on making them accessible via Digital Live. So if you're not local, but you're interested in doing a Th.M program and you're able to meet the entrance requirements, that's definitely doable. And then lastly, our preaching track, which has been a little bit revamped, but is still available. And again, all of these tracks, the faculty are very keen on students to be able to do them in person or to do them digitally through Digital Live offerings. The Master of Divinity degree did undergo some very slight changes, but not significant. The MDiv at Gordon-Conwell is probably never going to have really super drastic changes because we're always going to require Greek and Hebrew, at least as far as I can tell. But our credit hours did drop from 96 to 90. We basically dropped the mentored ministry units from 6 credits to 3 credits, and then we dropped 1 general elective. So there are fewer elective options in some ways, but where we had things prescribed, like you had to do a specific ethics course or a specific world missions course, some of those things have been opened up to give a little bit more flexibility within those areas. The Master's of Arts in Counseling has also undergone a few small changes. It used to be an 87 credit hour program. It is now an 81 credit hour program. It basically reduced the biblical studies courses by 1, reduced the counseling core by 1, and then, as always, if you test out of Old and New Testament survey, you can reduce your credits by another 6, which would be 75.